This is Start, Launch, Grow, brought to you by Million Labs.
Here's what we cover in today's episode. In our catch-up section, we unpack the art of scoping your product right. Then Simon will sit down with Aina Hatano, founder and CEO of Waveland Group, to discuss her start, launch, grow journey. And finally, we wrap up with one clear takeaway. Let's get started.
Hey Verena, how was your week?
Yeah, been good. It's quite tough. A lot of thinking and strategizing these days. I don't know how you feel, but so much is changing. And when I look around, it's incredible how quick you can now build apps. So I was just thinking, when I was back during my studies, I would have never thought that this whole thing is possible, right? Look at the tools like Lovable and Replit, etc. You can spin up an app over a weekend, don't you?
Yeah, if you know what you're doing, these tools are amazing. Allow you to build something, like you said, in a weekend, in a few days. At least you can build something that looks like an app, that's for sure.
The hard part, obviously, is still figuring out what to build.
Yeah, I think that's where sort of reality is meeting what's currently available. And that's where a lot of the non-technical founders struggle, is in getting that kind of initial prompt and knowing what you need to build and how to make it scalable as well. That's kind of key important. It's pretty easy to put a prompt in and get something out, but it's a lot harder to put a prompt in and get something out that's then usable. And it's rarely a single prompt. I know that's what all these apps are trying to go for, is the kind of the one prompt equals app. But the reality is that that's not, maybe never will happen, because there's not enough context in a single prompt, unless this prompt is thousands of pages of documentation. And that's not what most non-technical founders write. They write, oh, well, I want an Airbnb app and I want it to be a bit like this and a bit like that. Press return. And then they get something that looks a bit like Airbnb. I think that's the change that's occurring. But that first phase is critical for founders to get right. If we can get a good scope, which is what exactly what your app needs to do, then, you're probably about, based on our sort of 2,000 founders that we've looked at, you're about 53% more likely to have a successful app build and a successful product launch afterwards. So that's a significant increase.
It is. Yeah, it is. And I think this is the hardest part. And it has been a challenge all of the time, but it still is. So I think there is a difference between the marketing message, right? Like what these tools promise you to do, and then sometimes the reality. And we are asked the same question all the time. What does a good scope look like? What do we do? And we are dealing with that process all the time. So we thought we record an episode just to walk you guys through our framework. We have 5 steps all of our scope leads go through. And the number one step is always to discuss the business plan first. So we look at from a bigger picture, right? We always look at the business model, right? How do you want to make money, and the overall market opportunity? As you said, Simon, what we see all the time is that because it's now getting easier, people start to use the tool straight away, right? So they almost skip the first part. And because it's so tangible, they jump into it straight away. But really, the business model is, really important to make sure it's even worth your time to use these tools, right? And to spend time on iterating it. So our recommendation for you guys is, if you don't have an advisor, in your own network, look around who has built something similar, right? There are so many people out there on LinkedIn that are actually willing to share their experiences, etc. And it is really worth to pay them for an hour of their advice, like someone that's really in challenging use. Yes, friends and family are nice, but they also tend to be nice to you, right? So look for something else. Look for someone that you don't know, and that gives you more neutral feedback, because that's the part, as we said, that's saving you a lot of costs and time along the way.
And that step is really important for the prompt that goes into whatever AI engine that you might want to use. It needs to understand what your business model is. And most non-technical founders will just prompt away, as I said, like Airbnb, blah, 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 and never mention how they're going to make money. Well, it will build an app, one, with no monetization in it, and 2, when you do come to go, oh, how do I take payments? And you then try to add that in, that becomes a whole bunch of prompts and maybe re-architecture that you could have got right had you put that in at the start. So that step 1 is important. Step 2 is around personas. Who's going to be using this app? Who's the user? Who's the buyer? Who's the actual customer? Because that might be different to the user. What's each user trying to achieve with using your app? What's their main goal of using the app? And an app is typically got a minimum of 2 personas. That'll be the user and maybe then the admin. That's you. So that you can go in there and ban users, delete users, reset passwords, all those types of admin functions. That's the minimum. But if it's a marketplace, it could be 3, it could be 4, it could be 5 personas. So it can get quite complicated. But you need to be able to define who those different users are because they're going to have a different journey through the app.
That's probably intuitive for most people, but where we see a big differences is how well do you really know your customer, right? So you need to break down also the characteristics, right? You need to know them like your friends. Where do they hang around, right? What are their problems, right? How does their day-to-day look like? Because this will all matter for your marketing later on and for everything that you build within the app. So that's super critical. As Simon said, step number 2 is defining your persona, defining your customer and the different user types. Then in step number 3, we look at the different user flows. And this is, I think, where a lot of people tend to merge everything into one journey. But actually, when you look at the back end, there are different steps and different flows that each of the users follow. So, for example, if you have an expert marketplace, you have at least 3 user types, right? You have an expert, they need access, they need to list their services. Then you have the user looking for an expert, right? So they need to have all of the search functionalities. They need to enter all of their details. And then you have the admin who is like managing all of that. And each of the different user types has a different journey, right? So what we recommend you to do and what we do on a daily basis, basically mapping the journey from the login to, the sale, like the last transaction. How does like the flow look like on every single page? And then we use a Miro or, another tool basically to just put that all together, which is then later on also building the foundation for the database architecture.
And then step 4 is your features. And this is probably where most people will start. It's like, oh, I want it to have these features. But actually it comes afterwards because we're going to map the features back to the user flows and those personas. So that's why we do it kind of in this order. Everybody's got a login and sign up box. That's a feature. I need to be able to log in and sign up. And that might be relevant to all of your user personas. But then as Verena says, it starts to diverge as different users take different paths. If you take your example, the expert needs to be able to create a service. So that's create a service feature. They need to be able to, onboard their payments so that they can receive payments for it. That's another feature. And it's only specific to that particular persona. Whereas the user needs to be able to buy them. So they need to have a Stripe checkout, for example. That's a feature. So we map all of these features to the different user flows and to the personas. And we end up with a, very detailed view of each of those features and who they're going to apply to.
And then in the final step, step number 5, this is where we look at the designs. Now it's about bringing your app to life, right? And looking at the look and feel. And so we go through every page and then just work out how does it visually look appealing. And there are 2 options, like how you can work on this phase. Like either you can work together with a designer, right? Especially for consumer facing apps where it's a lot about gamification and so on. It might make sense to focus on the UI even more. Or there's also a second option to use the AI vibe coding apps to prompt them and they will come up with a design. This is usually fine, right? It's a bit less specific to your branding, but you can customize it along the way. So you need to put some time into it. So that really depends on, are you in a B2C, are you in a B2B market?
Just to recap. So step 1 was the business plan to give the context of why we're doing this, why we're building this app. Step 2 was the personas. So who's going to be using the app, etc. Step 3 is those user flows, how each of those personas are going to use the app and their journey through the app. Step 4 was around the features. So which features are going to apply to which persona. And then lastly, the design that Verena just talked about, step 5 for design. So that's the kind of high level architecture that we use for scoping an app before we start the build.
Yeah. And zooming out, the quality of what you build really depends on how you define these things up front. So it's definitely worth slowing down here to move fast long term. I would say, Simon, we covered a lot. Let's now move on to your chat with Aina and see how she got started.
Right, ladies and gentlemen, we are here with Aina from the Waveland Group, who is an established entrepreneur with lots of startups under her belt. So we're going to hear some of that story. So Aina, you were just telling me before we started recording, but tell me a bit about how you got started, the kind of what drove you to start the Waveland Group and some of the things that you've been up to.
Thank you. So how I started Waveland Group was actually the idea to develop a private island in Seychelles. So we are actually based in Seychelles. But after I started talking to some other friends who runs like several services, telling me that like after I exit, I would love to help your island project. Actually, I've been working for JP Morgan London as well as SoftBank for cross-border mergers and acquisition industry. So then I told them like, actually, I can help you selling your services or companies. And then that's how I started Ŵ Group as a consulting firm for mergers and acquisitions. Afterwards, I start seeing like so many clients coming just through word of mouth because like there is a huge gap, especially Japanese big corporation who wants to have a new type of services like cutting edge technologies, but they don't have those mentality. So they have the startup division inside of the company, but most of those great management team crush all those startup ideas because the revenue seemingly like way smaller than they expected. And then because they have already established millions of thousands of revenue from their main business. So there is not much good reason to start something. And then, so I started seeing this opportunity for us to create something for those big companies so that they can acquire something already like proof in the market. And then they don't have to have that risk. And also like, so using mergers and acquisitions as kind of buying the time and certain like first early adopters already there so that like they just need to put more money to marketing and then grow it bigger. So that's how like that's what they are good at. So and then like this system works really well. So I run 20 startups under my startup incubation, and then like I have already sold 18 of them.
Which is absolutely amazing. Anybody to sell one would be amazing, but you've sold 18 of the 20 so far. I mean, most die, but obviously you've got a method that kind of is able to take them and work them through. Is that because there's already a market there and you're just playing, you know, for example, the site that we did for you was a Patreon clone. There was, you know, you knew the business model worked, you would just bring it into the Japanese market. Is that right?
Yeah, completely right. Like in a nutshell, like we are trying to become the smaller version of Rocket startup based in Germany. Because I've been in mergers and acquisition industry, and then I started Ŵ Group as mergers and acquisitions consulting firm. Like we have already done like 150 mergers and acquisitions cases. And then so during the COVID, since lots of buyers want to make the most of the period to acquire those smart technologies, but because my company is not wasn't big enough, so like I had to figure out like what's the best deals that we should take. And then so we decided to like start some research of all those 150 cases. What's the criteria to make deals successful? And then I realized that like of course all of them are like have like different scenarios, and then it was not easy to find out the definition of success. But we finally figured out around like 30 criteria that match to Japanese market. And then that's also matched to the SoftBank's way for like making a successful cross-border M&A. And then like we also find Rocket Startups has done the similar kind of model. So we decided to take that model. So we find out basically in a nutshell, like we find out the great services outside of Japan, and then like completely localize that to Japanese market, because Japanese market has a very unique tendency. So like, for example, if it's English learning application, I actually put Panda for the new character. Panda is like from now it's difficult geopolitical situation is happening, but still like Panda is a harmless cute figure. And then everybody loves Panda. And then so it's called 𝘀𝗶𝗴𝘆. And then like that made a huge success for acquisitions. Like those small details has to be completely localized for Japanese market. Even like you first see that like those kind of system is already there to like learn English online, but still like if it's not completely localized to Japanese market, that's not gonna be used by Japanese audience. And then because I have tons of like Japanese market experience, so I decided to make the most of my experience as well as those great successful people has already done that before.
In terms of the M&A or the mergers and acquisitions piece, were they all sold to Japanese businesses, larger Japanese businesses, or were some sold to international?
It actually ended up to sold to like not only Japanese companies, like some of the acquirer came from the US or Vietnam who wants to get into Japanese market, because we normally run the service in Japan, but it's easily can be like translated to other market as well. But to acquire those like Japanese audience is pretty hard for those foreign companies to understand what Japanese like about, and then so that's the specific cases. And also like those Japanese big companies who we have been talking for our clients who wants to sell their services or companies. So basically my like 25 consultants have been always talking to those Japanese big corporations who wants to acquire certain services or products or technologies. So we have a certain criteria what they want, and then like it's pretty much detailed. So we know what they want to acquire.
Just sort of skirting back to like some of the individual startups that you worked on, you came to us to help you build something fairly quickly and fairly low cost to get it done. What was the thinking there? Because that's fairly, I mean, you're entrepreneurial clearly, but it's a fairly bold move at the time, because this was a few years ago now, to kind of pick a no-code solution and go that. What was the thinking there?
Actually, back then we were using different developer and then worked really well. So this incubation has a style. So from starting point to selling point, we only take 24 months. So we have to develop very quickly. But because of the situation of the war happening in Ukraine, and then so that our development team was in like fully in Ukraine, and then like suddenly it was hard for us to like keep on contacting them. So we ended up to have only kind of mock-ups, and then like it already took like half of the year. So 6 months have already passed. So like we have very solid systematized way to make the idea to the service to grow, to sell. And then 8 months was the limit for us to develop the service. And then we have to put it in the market. And then like we found Million Labs. Actually, my business partner / my husband found a Million Labs for his project. And then he said, they're awesome, so you should talk to them.
That's interesting. So 8 months. So from idea to into the market, 8 months, which is quite a short period of time. So that's designs and mock-ups, that's market research, that's, scoping the app, features, plans, etc., building the app, ready for launch in 8 months. So today, that's a relatively straightforward process, I think. I'm interested to hear about the launch piece. So like, how were you gaining users? What was the user acquisition strategy, that go-to-market piece?
At the beginning, we were like struggling to get the new users, obviously, because we didn't have much budget, because like what we are aiming at is to sell those services fairly low price so that those big companies inside have like certain delegation. So like I used to work for them, so I knew that like what kind of delegation they what kind of like authority those, not the CEO has, because like if we have to talk to the CEO, it's going to take like sometimes more than a year. So like Japanese are very slow and conservative, so we have to let some senior management to make decisions. Then so the selling price is, let's say average is around 1 million, but still like it's good for the market, like Japanese market, to have like new type of services, and also to like grow Japanese entrepreneurs mindset. So like I find out the person who is good at in that market, and then make him or her as a service manager, or more like a CEO of the service. And then this person must have already have the kind of the connection towards the audience or the sellers for the service. And then that worked well. But those people normally like is working for the big companies and then like willing to become an entrepreneur in the future. But they normally don't have like enough confidence to be outside of those like comfortable, good, big corporation life. So it works for like everybody, good for market, good for those wannabe entrepreneur, good for the big company who wants to have new services. And then they already have those access to the first customers.
Those people that you're bringing in as effectively CEO or service manager, so you're giving them a stability because they're going to get a salary, so they're paid, etc. So it's not the same risk as starting their own thing, so that makes sense. Are you giving them equity to bring them in, or just salary?
It's a combination of very small amount of salary, but also like success fee. So we didn't make it as a company, but like because it's internal service, but like we have special contract agreement that like we kind of outsource the operation towards that person who is like a service manager / CEO. And then like after we successfully sold the company, they can have 20% of the selling price.
So you're trying to get it sold within 24 months. So 8 months to build, that doesn't leave you very long in market. So you've got to go pretty quickly to build some kind of metrics, measures, KPIs that you can then use for the selling process. So you're on quite a J curve there to get that done. So were you raising capital, or was this all your own capital going in to drive that?
We also have one investor for one service, and then like everybody wants to, so like we have tons of investors lining up to invest in those like service. Luckily we got interviewed by Forbes Japan because like this idea itself was pretty new for the market. Also, like we have unique strengths that like have already access to thousands of big companies who wants to acquire those services. As you said, like it's really important to create the J curve. That's how we kind of appeal to the like big corporation. There should be the market opportunity, so you should acquire it now and then put more money. And then for those like investor can have at least double their investment amount, or at least 3 times according to our like numbers. The smallest one was like 3 times in the like ROI in 24 months, which is pretty good.
3x in 24 months, that's unheard of. You know, I think the average deal, certainly in Europe, is about 8 or 9 years to come good. I think in the UK, it's something like 2.6x or something like that is the average as well. So 9 years and 2.6x is not quite as good as 3x in 24 months. So that's all good. So from what I understood before we started this conversation, you're closing down the incubator because you've got a new thing that's coming on. You've got a new plan, which is kind of where you started, but you got sidetracked. Tell us a bit about the island and what you're doing there.
Thank you. So actually, my first company was not this Webland Group, but my first company was EdTech company. And then this got invited by Sir Richard Branson for his island called the Extreme Tech Challenge, like entrepreneur to meet up amazing investors type of events on his island. And then that got me like idea to create new type of community on the small island. My background is economics as well as psychology, which is now called behavioral economics. And then like even 20 years ago, I started seeing like after internet, like we still have the similar like capitalism or communism. And then like it's not working for humanity anymore, but like we are working for the system. So we need to have the new type of system. And then like some of the people try to change the government and try to make the big thing. But like as an entrepreneur, I see we should create a small scale model somewhere outside of the current system. And then like if that works, we can make it bigger, or we can duplicate that model towards some other places. And then that's how I start thinking about having an island to build a community as well as the economy. And then to do that, like I was in like mergers and acquisition as well as like tech industry. So I didn't have any idea how to develop an island, how to run a community. So that's a very long story short, but that's how I decided to move from Tokyo to Seychelles on the small artificial island to know how to run those like artificial island, the community, and like how to maintain those sustainability. And it's been 9 years now. So now I have a great connection towards the government as well as the technologies as well as the team. So like I start seeing, okay, this is a great, like good time for us to actually start acquiring the island and develop something on the island.
You're buying a physical island in the Seychelles so people can come and live there. And is it going to be tech people focused or just everything focused?
What we try to do is to attract similar kind of mindset people, which is like they must have this mentality to become outside of their box. And then like it's very like unique feeling when I went to, and then like now I live on the island called Eden Island, which has 500 families or houses and then 60 different nationalities. This is a gated community, so we get into the island with facial recognition. So it's super safe, and KYC has already done by the developer. And then it's a very like eco-friendly as well as literally fruitful island. So like there's mangoes, star fruits, coconuts everywhere. And then like the kids are running because we don't have any car. Like we just moving around by golf cart, and the air, is no pollution at all. And it's so beautiful. And then what we find out is that these 60 nationalities of people, I would say like 80% of them are like entrepreneurs or somebody who heritage the family businesses. So like I realized that those people must have those mentality who choose this isolated island to explore the world, explore themselves as well. And then in that terms, like this person can be like anybody, like can be entrepreneur, can be doctor, can be, I don't know, somebody from like refugee camp. And like I'm just come up with this Malala Yousafzai, the youngest Nobel Peace Prize receiver. And so those kind of people who wants to challenge themselves to find out the meaning of life, getting into the community, creating the good community together.
All I can do is say thanks for your time with us. Really good luck with the new chapter with the island, etc. When it's open and running, let us know. We'd love to come and visit, if nothing else. There's places to stay for family and friends, so that would be amazing.
Welcome back, Simon. So what would you say is one of the key insights that stayed with you from the conversation with Aina?
I think the key insight I got from her was the way that they went and looked for a CEO, or they called it service manager, but somebody with those set of skills for that industry, and brought them in. I think that's a really interesting one for founders, is like thinking about what's your skill set and what skill sets are you missing, and maybe going and finding those individuals to bring them into the startup as soon as possible makes sense, because as she said, they bring contacts and they bring access into that market, and that was key for her getting quick exits.
If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe for more conversations like this. We also share practical start, launch, grow insights in our newsletter. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.